Did you have this? Yes. I'm looking
Hello, hello. Welcome to Legacies and Lunch. The topic today is hot springs and the birth of the National Park Service. My name is Guy Lancaster. I'm editor of the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, which is a project of the Central Arkansas Library System. And this monthly program is currently being held here at UA Little Rock downtown, thanks to Marta and Emily, and features talks on Arkansas-related topics. If you're joining us in person and are parked in the library parking garage, be sure to stop by the table at the back to get a sticker to validate your parking. You probably also noticed that we have complimentary cookies and drinks back there, so be sure to grab some. Don't leave any leftovers. I would like to remind you at this time to be sure to make sure your cell phones are on silent. Before we get started, a few announcements. Our upcoming, our Friday, second Friday art night is this Friday, May 9th. Join us downtown from 5 p.m. to 8 p.m. at the Cal's Rocket Lab at 120 River Market Avenue for free drinks, music, art, and more. Stop by each second Friday to chat with local artists, shop locally from Arkansas mark makers, listen to some music, and enjoy some wine. They also have a program of knitting too that will be occurring. There was a used book sale, quarterly Cal's used book sale at the port. Thursday 2 to 5, Friday and Saturday 10 to 2. That's one of our big fundraisers. So if you need some more books, or even if you don't, just please zip over there and buy some. Today's Legacies and Lunch features Dr. Kane West, who is an academic historian and park ranger at Hot Springs National Park. A native son of Arkansas, he has spent the last decade in the National Park Service, living and working all over the country at a variety of nature and history themed parks. He earned his PhD in history from the University of South Carolina in 2019. His academic research on settlement in the Arkansas River Valley kept him tethered to his home state. Dr. West joined the staff of the Hot Springs National Park in 2021, finally joining his academic passion with his home state enthusiasm. Among his accomplishments, he published articles in the Encyclopedia of Arkansas, Journal of the Early Republic, and Journal of Southern History, as well as book reviews in the Journal of African American History and the Journal of Agricultural History. He's also received high fives from numerous kindergarten-age park visitors. He is currently serving as the acting interpretation program manager. Common knowledge tells us that Yellowstone National Park is the first national park created in 1872. Historical evidence, and many devoted Arkansans, however, tells that Hot Springs National Park is the oldest national park, first protected in 1832. What's the truth? According to Dr. Kane West, the real important focus is how Hot Springs figured into the establishment of the National Park Service in 1916. Join the exploration about the role of the Great American Spa in the creation of America's best idea. If you have questions and are joining us via Zoom, please put your questions in the Q&A box, and we will alternate in-person and virtual questions at the end of the session. So I'll turn this over to Dr. West.
Good noon time to everybody. I did have Dunkin' Donuts this morning. America runs on Dunkin'. I'm also at the later end of the caffeine boost, and so I'm both staying energized and feeling a little bit under caffeinated. So if I take a few minutes to get going, I just need more of Dunkin' Donuts later. It is not an advertisement for Dunkin', it's just what I did this morning. All right, so welcome everybody. Thank you all for coming out and seeing me. I am from Arkansas. I love the state of Arkansas, and so when I give presentations, it's not just to tell a story, but if I give presentations in Arkansas, the goal, and I make sure I'm on my time, the goal is to make y'all proud of the place that you call home. And so when I came to Hot Springs a few years ago, I had sort of had three main focuses. I either do hot springs and its influence on early American science, hot springs and its influence on early American health, and or hot springs and the National Park Service. So this topic is about hot springs and the National Park Service. We're going to have two main dates to think about, 1832 and 1916. And as we go through today's talk, you'll sort of hear a hot springs and the National Park Service, 1832, 1916. And in the second half, we'll sort of figure out how hot springs plays into that 1916 creation of the National Park Service discussion. So we're going to have a history, and if you're a national park super fan or parkie, you'll hear sort of inspiring quotes. If that's not quite what you are, but you're an Arkie super fan, then at least you'll hear some cool things about Arkansas. And if you do, if you hear something that sort of inspires you about Arkansas, please feel free to do a pig suey, maybe like a slightly above a whisper, but not a full, we're not at Reynolds Razorback Stadium, so and I won't comment on it. I'll just know that that gave you a sense of pride or a moment of pride in the state. Speaking of moments of pride, they just surpassed 8,000 entries on the Encyclopedia of Arkansas. Well done, Guy, and all of your staff for the work that you do on continuing to tell the story of hot springs. And you'll even see some photos in this presentation from the Cowles Butler Center Digital Library. So thank you all very much there. So, hot springs and the birth of the National Park Service. I am also inspired by the national parks. I don't know who that guy is. He looks sort of familiar. But when I am looking for national parks, I'm looking for something. I'm looking for wide, shallow, rocky streams. And the reason is because I started my Park Service journey going to the Buffalo, right? Wide, shallow, rocky streams. Here I'm in Olympic National Park in the Hoh Rainforest. We have the Pacific Northwest, only rainforest. I think this is a blinky. We have snow-capped mountains in the distance and a wide, shallow, rocky stream. So I can be inspired by national parks even though I work in them. Does anybody else want to quickly share their most recent or their first memory at a national park, what they look for parks?
Clingman's Dome.
Clingman's Dome, recently renamed in the Smokies. But the highest point on the East Coast, right? You go to high points and you look out and you are in something that is held by all of us, right? This democratic space. I heard from y'all that you like to go RVing, that you've spent lots of time in parks. You spent time at Gulper Gorge in Hot Springs National Park, right? So maybe you go for relaxation, maybe you go for inspiration, maybe you go to sweat a lot when you go hiking for like the first time all year when you go to national parks. But you always will end up with a smile on your face. And so we were going to look for that same birth of inspiration for the Park Service and the birth of inspiration for hot springs. And actually the birth of hot springs begins with the water. Now, I'm going to be giving a presentation on the history of the water, where the water begins in June. But in the meantime, water lands into the mountains around hot springs, all up Park Avenue and Highway 5. If you've ever been to the roundabout between Hot Springs and Hot Springs Village, you've been driving through the Hot Springs recharge zone the whole time. So Hot Springs protects where the water emerges. And so it goes down, rains. 4,400 years later, that hot water comes out as steaming hot springs, 143 degrees on average. I don't know if any of you knew recently, but it rained yesterday and part of today, and that rain will come out in another 4,400 years if we protect it right. When we're in hot springs, we are always in the middle of almost a 9,000-year epoch in the history of the world. That's a pretty amazing forever that we do every day, right, that we protect. And so hot springs is going to become, once the water goes down, it comes out, that's when the human story begins, right here. And that human story in hot springs, specifically referring to the park, our human story dates back 12,000 years. But in terms of the park and its creation, we can really look at the early 1820s. And it is already emerging as a health place. We have a Louisiana newspaper who says that these springs seem placed here for the relief and benefit of the inhabitants of the Valley of the Mississippi. Health is connected to place, right? If you have a fever in Arkansas, it's an Arkansas fever. If you have a fever in California, it's a California fever. Now, if you have a fever, according to Christopher Walken, what's the only solution?
Cowbell.
More cowbell. If you don't have cowbell, then you go to hot springs, right? And so hot springs is the healing place of the nation. If by the balance of nature, you should be able to go find respite and relief. And this gets the attention of the Arkansas Territorial Legislature. They're going to write this document 5 blocks from here. So I had to include this quote, connects us back to Little Rock. If that bountiful gift of nature should be monopolized by individuals, they may withhold their aid from the afflicted poor. And so we have to heal the people, we have to heal all the people. Right? We don't want to put a wall around it, we want to make sure that these springs are for everyone. And so there's this local push to create or to protect the springs. They send stuff to Congress. Congress says, what on earth is this? They send it back, they reject it, but we keep on pushing because Razorbacks are resilient. And in 1832, we get our founding legislation. This image is the oldest image that we have of hot springs. There's going to be just a hot springs creek. There's some hot springs running off the hillside, a couple of so basically shacks. And Arkansas's favorite writer, or one of my favorite early Arkansas writers, a guy named Hiram Whittington. One of those is his post offices. So this is what it looks like when this legislation is passed that creates Hot Springs Reservation, 1832, April 20th. We just turned 193 years old. I was actually there at the signing. And so the water may or may not keep you young and vital. But it's a short introduction. In fact, in some sense, hot springs protection is the last thing that people are thinking about. And here's how boring our initial legislation is. I wanted to put just words on the PowerPoint because that's how you're supposed to do it. Enacted by the Senate and House of Representatives. Talks about salt springs in the territory of Arkansas. It talks about salt springs again, that they should be leased. And then the third thing that is mentioned in this legislation, almost as if by happenstance, is that hot springs in the territory of Arkansas shall be reserved for the future disposal of the United States and shall not be entered, located, or appropriated. And that's it, right? There's nothing idealistic, there's no best idea, there's no for the people, it's just don't touch the water, don't try to sell it. Now, despite that being our beginning, we can look back at that legislation, and this is a document from the National Park Service in 1916. And when anybody says, what is the oldest national park? You see Yellowstone, and it has 1872 on it. Can anybody see on my pixelated form what is above or before Yellowstone? Hot Springs. What's the year? 1832. So this legislation did a lot of work. And so that's the end of my presentation. We are the oldest national park. Thank you all very much. So Hot Springs actually isn't the beginning of federal protection. What it is the first natural resource set aside by the federal government for access to the people. Now, this isn't the first formation of this idea. We'd seen hot springs in that earlier in our legislation. Hot Springs goes back to the state of Ohio. There have been salt reservations. Federal government sets them aside, says nobody can own a salt spring. You have to, you can lease it basically, but it's leased from the federal government. And you'll see similar language to what the Hot Springs legislation says, shall be reserved for the future disposal of the United States. So Hot Springs, our model is actually salt springs. And then in the and this is from the late 1700s, by the 1820s and 30s, there was another form of reservation. And these are naval live oak reserves, right? So the federal government is going to protect live oaks, not because they are beautiful to take photos in, but because we can use the wood to build ships. And so this is a federal protection of a natural resource, but it is not for public access, it's for military use. But those are the predecessors to hot springs, once described as a spa on the edge of civilized settlement. And it's shacks, it's a bunch of open springs, it's some hotels. But this is sort of the beginning of a spa movement, again, set aside for the benefit, for the people. of the Mississippi Valley. And then something that's more familiar to park people comes along, and it's big, wide open spaces, room to make wonderful family memories. By the 1860s, the Yosemite Valley becomes a target of curiosity to a guy who had been in New York. His name was Fred, and Fred had helped to develop something that you all have heard of, Central Park. Central Park is basically a giant green space for people in the cities. You're supposed to be able to get out of the cities and go on a pleasure drive or walk through the trees, and it's supposed to be a respite from the busyness of modern life. He is then sent to California, and he sees Yosemite Valley, and he basically wants to superimpose that Central Park idea on Yosemite Valley and make it a pleasuring ground full of paths. But he's going to describe, when he's talking about Yosemite, he wants the federal government to establish these great public grounds free for the enjoyment of the people. We see a lot more idealism here, and we see this sort of real notion of democratic access. In Europe, the grand places are only for the wealthy. There's no access for all the people. Frederick Law Olmsted wants these grand places to be accessible to all the people. And his sort of vision of Yosemite is really going to be taken up in 1872. This place, anybody know where this is? Has anybody been to this spot? Is anybody excited to figure out where this is? You can go on your next family trip to this plot. This is the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, 1872. This image, well, just after 1872, this image, you can actually go see this. This is in the National Gallery of Art, and it is enormous. It is like twice the size of this wall, and it will make you fall in love with the grand spaces of America, because Yellowstone is set aside not for healing, not for the bison, but for scenery, right? The original Instagram spot. Parks were set aside as scenic places. And this is going to capture the American imagination. People are going to be thrilled that they can see this not only in 4K, which is very nice screens, by the way, but they can see it in person. And the idealism that's in the founding of Yellowstone is much more replete with something that's supposed to inspire the soul. It's not just that the federal government is going to set aside this land, but it's for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. Right? There's a sense of purpose to the setting aside that's written into the legislation. And everybody's going to go try to find other places for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. And between 1872 and 1916, we're going to get over a dozen national parks set aside. Does anybody recognize anything in here? Any place they've been?
Mount Rainier.
Mount Rainier, over in the corner, absolutely. Crater Lake, deepest lake in the United States, super amazing. Go now because they're going to shut off one of the trails to it for the next 2 years. What else? Mesa Verde, set aside by a women's conservation group, which sort of starts to take a lot of these nature places and says, hey, we need to do history too. Where else? Sequoia, specifically General Grant's biggest trees. If you go there, you will weep because you are enthralled by it. Anything else you notice? We just talked about this one. We're going to get an A+ on this question. Yosemite. We got Rockies, home of John Denver, Rocky Mountain High. We got Glacier. We have Mackinac, which no longer exists as a national park, but it still exists as a place that you can go. We have everybody's famous national park, Platte National Park. Anybody ever been there? Decommissioned, just like Mackinac Island. Like these amazing places, and if you've ever gone and sat in front of Old Faithful, like the most famous water timed thing on the planet. Right? Nature works on a human timestamp. It's very convenient. So we have national parks, and they are these scenic, amazing places. And they say that the place in the country has beautiful landscapes and foundational stories, and that we share them together. They're sort of drawn into Frederick Law Olmsted's idea that they're for the benefit and enjoyment of the people. We even got a couple of mineral springs in there. Because Europe has cathedrals, but the United States has cathedrals, right? These places that are shaped by the majesty of time and by the movement of the earth. And if you're looking for an identity to what the United States is, you can find it in the land. This is a land that is a place of new possibility, of deep stories, but new futures, right? It's different from Europe. It's at least the story that's being told in the national parks. This is what we have to offer to the world. This is what you come here for. But there's also other things that are happening at this time in the United States. We're losing the frontier. There's another guy named Fred. I'm going to talk about the closing of the frontier by the 1890s. We also have tremendous forest reserves, many of which are being cut over. The amount of virgin forest that's cut between 1860 and 1920 is tremendous. Part of the reason that the Smokies is set aside is like 50% of it had been clear cut prior to the 1920s, 1930s. And also this map, has anybody ever seen this map before? This is the map, the extermination of the American bison. And it will show you year by year what happens to 16 million bison who become less than 100 individual creatures by circa 1890. Something has happened to the country. We have cathedrals to offer, but we might be cutting them down. And so this is going to inspire a very short, stout, enthusiastic guy, Teddy. And he is going to be searching for an identity for the country. He's going to be searching also for manhood. There's a concern that the American man was becoming less virile at this time. So that's why he had to put on the cool pants and go run around in the woods, become a pugilist. But he's going to talk about the national parks. There can be nothing in the world more beautiful than the Yosemite. The groves of giant sequoias and redwoods, the canyon of the Colorado, the canyon of the Yellowstone, the Three Tetons. And our people is giving a directive. Our people should see to it that they are preserved for their children and their children's children forever, with this majestic beauty all unmarred. He's going to go to the Grand Canyon. He's going to get out of a train. He's going to look at this, and like every sane person, he is going to be stupefied. And hopefully he didn't fumble with his phone and then lose it over the side of the canyon. But he tells us once again, or he tells the people who are there, I want to ask you to keep this great wonder of nature as it is now. Leave it as it is. You cannot improve it. The ages have been at work on it, and man can only mar it. Right? There's sort of this sense of, here's what we have, let's not squander it. And so he's going to push for further legislation. He was like 6 years old in 1872. He didn't form the first national parks. But he is going to look for ways to protect national parks, specifically with something called the Antiquities Act. Before the Antiquities Act, the way that you protect a national park is you get some congressmen and they pass a federal legislation. For Teddy, that's not fast enough, so he's going to push through the 1906 Antiquities Act, which allows the president to set aside national monuments to protect places of historic and ecological and geological value. The Antiquities Act is still the motion through which federal legislation for parks is pursued. And he is going to set aside between 1906 and 1909, 18 new national monuments. He's going to double the number of places protected. We're going to get the Redwoods. We're going to get Montezuma's Castle. We're going to get Close Encounters of a Third Kind. We're going to get the Grand Canyon. Really so well. We're going to get Chaco Canyon, Petrified Forest. Basically, we get a bunch of I-40 stops. If you're driving from Arkansas to California, you now have something to do along the way because of those national monuments. So the Grand Canyon starts as a national monument. Petrified Forest starts as a national monument. Olympic starts as a national monument. And so there's now legislation to say we have something to offer, we need to protect it. How do we do it faster? I have an idea. And there's hot springs. It's no longer just a place on the edge of civilized settlement. We now got cool green mountains. We got a creek. We got some bridges. It looks very different from the other national parks, but it's part of what is by 1916 37 different places federally protected. Now, there is a question about what to do with federal lands. We've protected them, but how do we use them? And one of the other answers for how to use federal lands, especially forests, was to manage them. National forests, Arkansas had the first national forests in the South, set aside around the same time as the Antiquities Act, but it says, hey, you know what we're going to do with these forests? We're not going to use them in the Department of the Interior. We're going to use them in the Department of Agriculture. The forests are basically a crop. We cut them down, we regrow them, we cut them down, we regrow them, so that we care for the land, we care for the watersheds, but we're serving the people. We have a use for this space. And this is a very important conservation tool, and it's a different vision for the national parks. Today I say that the Forest Service is like, you can use it, just get a permit, and the Park Service says, don't touch it. Right? Different visions for what we should do with public lands. And so between resource damage across the country, alternative conservation efforts, by the time we get to 1916, the parks are idealistically incredible, but we got major managerial issues. There's 37 of them. They're not combined. There's no concentrated reasoning behind national parks. They are all individualized, right? So it's divide and conquer. They don't have much push in Congress, so they're not getting much. They have limited funds, and through all those 37 places, there are 90 employees. For America's treasures, it's much more of an idea and an ideal than a reality. And so it takes 1916 legislation to come together, pushed by a guy named Steve Mather. If you've ever been to Pettagene, the lodge is named after Stephen Mather. And that legislation is going to take this ideal and it's going to try to come up with a bureaucracy that will protect national parks for present and future generations. And so here we go. This is the Organic Act. If you wear this outfit, if you're not a parker, you probably never heard of this. If you are a parker, you might have heard of this. If you're a park ranger, you have to repeat it once every 5 days. This is the creed that gives us an explanation, right? So we preserve scenic, natural, and historic objects unimpaired for the enjoyment of future generations. So you are supposed to go to your parks, but don't mess it up, because we also need to keep it for your children and your children's children and your children's children's children. Right, so we see in here that scenery aspect. We see Frederick Law Olmsted in here. We see that Yellowstone for the benefit and enjoyment of the people in here. We see the unimpaired for future generations in here from Teddy. Right, these ideals of the national park. This is what's supposed to inspire Americans to how to preserve our nation's cathedrals. Fun fact. In section 2, the first named location in the National Park Service. It's kind of, it could be a throwaway maybe, but it's Hot Springs Reservation in the state of Arkansas. We're the first place named in the Organic Act for the National Park Service. We don't like to brag, but we're right there. And so in some sense, the national parks, like this vision, it's not really clear to a lot of early advocates whether Hot Springs does belong. Here are some wonderfully supportive quotes from major thinkers in the National Park Service. Hot Springs. I want you to raise your hand for the most disparaging that you hear on here, so I'll take some votes from the audience. I'm not going to hear any woo pig sueys, I'm sure. Hot Springs somehow never seemed like a national park. Okay. That park, which we always segregate from the rest, the Hot Springs of Arkansas, it's a health resort rather than a pleasure ground. All right, do we have any votes for the first one? All right, I got 4 votes. Any votes for the second one?
Second one.
Second one, and now also a verbal affirmation. We're doing A's and nays. The third one. So I'm not really sure how this is a diss, but somehow it definitely is. Right, so for people who are thinking about the ideals of the national park, Hot Springs doesn't fit. Right, it doesn't quite make sense. But the second half of this program, what I'm going to try to present to you is that Hot Springs does make sense, not for the idealists, but for the realists. There's a patriotic fervor in national parks, but there's also a practicality. And that's where Hot Springs is going to fit in. And that's where we can sort of like leave with a little bit of more Wu Pig Sui in our gumption, because you don't need to convince the people in the choir. You need to convince the people who haven't walked through the door yet. And it's going to be kind of hard. Because raise your hand, which seems more of like a national park? I had 1 vote. I had 1 eye scratch for this one. Okay, we're tied so far. Do we want to do a re-vote? Yes. All right, raise your hand for Yellowstone as super inspirational Valley View. All right, raise your hand for Hot Springs as the more inspirational Valley View. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. 9 hearts in the front. We're not trying to pit them against each other. I worked in Yellowstone my last day there. Again, I cried. I was working there on July 4th of 2017. And I was in tears. It's one of my most visceral moments as a park ranger, that I got to help protect these places that y'all have decided are part of the American ideal, even if they were created almost 100 years after, protected almost 100 years after the July 4th, 1776 declaration, right? So this is still cool, no disparaging. But they're very different looking. But for some advocates, this is what we're looking for. This isn't quite it. But for other advocates, and we'll see why, Hot Springs really emerges to take the cake, because some not idealists but practicality folks, they realize that there's an argument that progress is better than nostalgia. They make the argument that the Forest Service is already a better protective device or conservation device than the Park Service, and so advocates of the park are trying to say that it's not just scenery that we're protecting. If it's scenery, it might not last long enough as an institution. It might not be strong enough. And so early advocates of the Park Service are also trying to give other reasons for why parks have a function in American life. The first one, we're going to stimulate national patriotism. We're going to further knowledge and health. We're going to divert tourists to the scenic areas of the United States. Right? These are the foundational things that parks should provide. Again, we're going to stimulate national patriotism. If we're a big, wild, large, numerous nation, how do you hold people together? The argument is like, well, maybe parks hold people together. Maybe they're part of the common identity. And also going to talk about knowledge and health. That it's not just that we have recreation places, but that parks should provide knowledge about who we are. It should provide health for the people, right? It's health that fully justifies the plea for moral and financial aid from the federal government. There's a function to it. There's a utility to it, a usefulness, and also diverting travel to scenic areas. Who here loves to go to the wilderness of national parks? Who here likes to sleep on the ground when you're exploring the wilderness of national parks? Who here, given the choice between the dirt and a mattress, choose the dirt? All right, fantastic, because people want to vacation and sleep in a bed and want a hotel. Why are you going to go out all west? You know, how are you going to get the Rockefellers to not go to Europe? You're going to tell them to sleep on the ground? I don't think so. You got to give them something nice to do. So patriotism, knowledge and health, travel, where you can start to imagine, if we could, some ways that Hot Springs might play into that. What's happened in the United States by the late 1800s is that there's a new health movement. The health movement is about access to clean water. Access to clean water is probably one of the most powerful public health interventions in the United States in the 19th century. If you were a major East Coast city, New York, Baltimore, Philly, Chicago, we'll throw that in there. You have probably built a bathhouse because even by 1890, 30% of your population actually has access to clean water. We're going to get you clean. Has anybody ever heard cleanliness is next to godliness? All right, that is coming out of the water health movement. There's also rural places. Hot Springs is one of them. Hot Springs is not the only one of them. By 1900, there's like 500 mineral spa resorts in the United States. If you were going on vacation 120 years ago, you were probably going to a mineral spa resort. Hot Springs is going to emerge as basically the center of that. We're going to go from sort of ramshackle edge of civilized settlement spas, and we're going to get the cool stuff. We're going to get Victorian architecture. We're going to get a row of magnolias. Actually, they started out as Italian poplars, but then we wanted to go more Louisiana than Italy. And so we've got the magnolias. They're blooming right now. Please go take a look at them. Or, just, I mean, they're also blooming in Little Rock. So I guess that don't have to go just for magnolias. But it has become the largest concentration of bathhouses in the United States. You have a health movement. We have the most infrastructure for it. Not only that, through the 1870s, people who are coming to hot springs are among the sickest and in some cases the poorest people in the United States. They've been denied health care, their physicians don't believe them, their disease might get them shamed or shunned from their communities, and hot springs for many people is the only place where they can receive care, and they're going to the open air springs. There's a very large fight about this that is probably the most important story in hot springs. You can see it on one of my other presentations. It's called the Rattle Hole. It's the most famous healing spring in the country, or one of, but that is going to transform from a raw open spring to a federal government bathhouse, a government-free bathhouse. It's the only, or the first, and not only time that the federal government has created a medical bathhouse free for the people. It's in Hot Spring. Not only that, Hot Springs has active duty soldiers and veterans who they've been wounded in the recent Civil War. They have debilitating illnesses and diseases. If you want to read more about that, go read Mark Christ's multiple books on health and soldiers in Arkansas. And a guy named John is going to put legislation in that puts the Army Navy General Hospital into commission in the 1880s. So soldiers who are coming to Hot Springs are no longer just fitting in with the masses. It's the oldest all-branch military hospital in the history of the United States, the precursor to Walter Reed. And the soldiers who are there are talking about the Civil War, and they're alongside the poorest people in the country, and they're alongside people who are going for help from all over the United States. And so Hot Springs by the 1880s has emerged as the nation's health resort, as the nation's healing community. We got cool old buildings, we got a government-free bathhouse, we got this cool Yellowstone Lodge looking thing. Hot Springs is at the center of healing. What kind of healing do you ask? The cool kind, right? So if we're going to further knowledge and health, we got medical bathing, we got medical massage, we're using water as medicine. This is actually coming out of Europe. People they're doing all sorts of crazy things with tubes and baths and electric baths. Don't worry, water is only slightly electrified, not totally electrified. We got fitness movements. If you want to know about the history of holistic health in the United States, you need to see what is accepted and utilized in bathhouses and hot springs circa 1890, 1900. The history of holistic health is happening in hot springs. So we have this water-based treatment, so hydrotherapy, water therapy treatment, so water-based treatments. We got steam baths, apparently famous in an I Love Lucy episode. We have warm towel wraps. We have baths with drinking water. Right? We're using water as medicine. People are coming here by the tens of thousands because, believe it or not, you are not the first people to have aches, pains, chronic illness, unexplained medical issues, and you're also not the first people to feel desperate and just you need relief. So people are coming to Hot Springs by the tens of thousands. Right? Some people are coming to take a breath. Some people are coming for their last breath. They're coming to hot springs. Not only that, but now we need to divert tourist travel. And hot springs, who here believes that hot springs is the place of snowbirds? We are the original place of snowbirds. We're like one of the first year-round resorts in the United States. Hot Springs National Park in the winter. Hot Springs Reservation, famous winter resort. People are coming here. They're hanging out here year-round. And this is important. Because the whole landscape changes into one of health. It's not just the bathhouses. You're supposed to get on the promenade and stroll to your heart's content. If I see you walking, you need to turn back, get a parasol, and do like a nice Victorian era saunter. This is for sauntering. You can drink water straight from the ground. You can hang out with your friends and drink water straight out of these beautiful fountains. This is one of the fountains in Hot Springs, Arkansas. Right, it's a landscape of health. And why is this popular? Because across the United States, post-Civil War, there is a vast change in people's how people are traveling. We got Coney Island. We didn't have Coney Island, we wouldn't have Nathan's Hot Dogs, right? We get Saratoga Racetrack. Know where you're gonna go watch horse racing? French Lick, Indiana. If there's no French Lick, Indiana, there's no Larry Bird. The hit from French Lick, Boston Celtics are about to play game 2 tonight. Just my NBA references, won't do that again. And then Warm Springs, Georgia. But there is a national travel movement. What does Hot Springs do? A little bit of all those same things. Let's name them off. What is this? Oaklawn. It's Oaklawn. What is this? What are they doing? They're golfing. We have one of the oldest golf courses west of the Mississippi. We are the birthplace of spring training baseball. Not only that, but the most important thing that we have to entertain people in Hot Springs, because they're here for 3 weeks to take the baths. Take the bath for about an hour and a half, then you got to do other things besides horse racing, golfing, and baseballing. You have to go straddle an alligator. Right? We're entertaining the masses. We're entertaining the people. Everything that you see in Hot Springs today is, in some sense, a legacy of this late 19th century movement. The movement is happening in Hot Springs because of the water, because of the bathhouses. There's an infrastructure there. Not only is there an infrastructure, we got hotels. This one actually doesn't even exist anymore. In the 1890s, correspondents from the New York Times are going to come down and they're going to report that Hot Springs has, at least word on the street, 500 hotels and boarding houses. It is the most hoteled city in the United States outside of New York City, according to that article. You want to go lay on a bed? We got beds. It's like a President's Day mattress sale. You don't even have to worry about it. And they are beautiful. These are the biggest hotels in the United States. This one doesn't exist. Today we have the Arlington, 100 years old, as of New Year's Eve, right? We have accommodations for the people. We are America's health and pleasure resort. That's how it's often described, America's health and pleasure resort. And you can go see this room if you go on a tour with me in the Fordyce Bathhouse. Just to get a quick call out, again, to look at some of the digitized images in the Cowles Butler Center archives. Hot Springs isn't the only place. Anybody seen that place before? Well, yell it out. We got Eureka Springs. We got Searcy. We got Siloam Springs, Heber Springs. If there's a town with the name Springs in it, it probably developed as a mineral spa resort. And Arkansas has its fair share. We also had one at the base of Mount Nebo. Today, people come across those and are like, what's going on here? 100 years ago, people would have known that it was part of this vast movement for health, recreation, and connecting to the land. And Arkansas has got lots of them, and you can see the photos again on this library, that library system's digital archives. The last part, we're stimulating national patriotism. Again, first all-branch military hospital in the history of the United States. The government-free bathhouse. People would say, especially in the 1870s, you would come to Hot Springs, you would go to a bath, stay in a hotel, and at some point you would go up to Rouse Spring and you would see the sickest people in the United States being healed by the federally protected springs. It's supposed to rejuvenate the American man and woman back to health. So anybody's supposed to, even if you can't afford a bathhouse, you can go to the government-free bathhouse. The idea was that we have two options. If somebody is super sick and debilitated, whether they're a sharecropper or a Civil War veteran, or they're injured in Lowell at a manufacturing accident, they can either become so debilitated that they become paupers upon the state, or they come to hot springs, we heal them, return them to health, return them to being active members of society. And that's how they were talking about the government-free bathhouse in the 1890s. And all of that is under the auspices of Mr. Sam. Uncle Sam bathes the world at Hot Springs, Arkansas, at the national park. This is a patriotic thing that we can all share together. And the whole landscape has been designed by the federal government. We have this cool entrance. We still have these pillars, and everybody asks, hey, where's the entrance sign? It's right here. We got a creek arch. We got the row of bathhouses. We got the government-free bathhouse. This is a landscape designed by the federal government. Not only that, there are other places inspired by the Spriz, the hot springs model. Thermopolis, Wyoming, anybody been there? It does exist. I was there for the 2017 eclipse. A small place is called Banff Hot Springs Reservation. You might have heard of it as Banff National Park in Canada. We have Saratoga, New York State Reservation, modeled off of Hot Springs. We have Platte National Park, Warm Springs, Georgia, also modeled off of Hot Springs. Big Bend National Park, Hot Springs, modeled off of Hot Springs. Mineral Wells, Texas, modeled off of Hot Springs. The Hot Springs model of a state or federal-owned space protected for its healing waters for the people. It does inspire places around the country. And it works. I'm going to let y'all take a moment, look through some of these places, look through some of the numbers of people who are going to these parks. Hot Springs. Over 100,000 people are going to Hot Springs every year by the turn of the century. In 1915, on the eve of the National Park Service, Hot Springs is the most visited national park in the United States. I need to hear some woo pig sueys. All right. A third of all visitors to the National Park Service are coming to Hot Springs. The people demand it, they're coming there, and sometimes the federal government is just responding to it. You talk about diverting tourist travel. Cha-ching. Ding, we got it. Check mark. Not only that, if you're a progressive era person, Hot Springs is incredible. It is meeting all sorts of needs. We have a place that's providing healthcare to veterans, and it is a health and pleasure resort owned and controlled by the United States government. What does that mean? It is well managed. Remember those 90 people who work in the national parks? 30 of them work at Hot Springs. The first African American women to work in the National Park Service? Hot Springs. The first white women to work in the National Park Service? Hot Springs. First African American men to work in the National Park Service? Hot Springs. We have doctors, we have laborers, we have policemen, we have stenographers. This is the most well-managed park in the country. Right? If the progressive era says that there can be intelligence and genius, why not? At the federal level, Hot Springs is trying to show that that management can take place. A third of all the people working in the National Park Service are working in Hot Springs. The people love it. And it is basically self-sufficient. The water rents and the building leases are used to be put back into the government-free bathhouse to pay the employees. The only time that people in Hot Springs are asking for appropriations is because the government-free bathhouse is never big enough for the amount of people who are going there. It is constantly being upgraded. So the only thing that we need is more space for the people. They're demanding these parks, they're demanding the water. Hot Springs is basically a self-sufficient, well-run, for the people institution. We are a progressive era dream. Go on. And so it's not a coincidence that during the legislative debates about the access to the park, the superintendent or former Secretary of the Interior, this is his opening paragraph about why the parks should exist. Remember, we have Forest Service, we have resource destruction, we have this ideal of the parks. But what park is mentioned in this guy's opening line? Perhaps one of the most remarkable and most useful, remember that's a debate at that time, of them all, is one which you are all especially familiar, because people aren't going to Yellowstone. A lot of these senators, they haven't made it to Yellowstone, but they made it to Hot Springs. They are there next to the people at the government free bathhouse. You are familiar with Hot Springs, Arkansas, where the medicinal waters have been the principal attraction. Hot Springs is not for people who are totally diehard parkies. It's for people who are unsure of if the federal government can actually do the operation. Hot Springs is where people have seen it in action. And at Hot Springs, it is a successful leisure resort. There are over 20 places to take a bath. There's a chief medical officer. It's the leading scientific medical space in the United States. At the beginning of the professionalization of medicine, every physician by the 1900s and every bath attendant who is working there has passed some sort of federal test, right? The former presidents of the American Medical Association are physicians in Hot Springs. So this is a federally managed medical space, and the people love it. It is the most visited park in the country, tens of thousands of people a year. And they're at least suggesting that there are demonstrable health outcomes. Anybody have family that has ever used to go to Hot Springs? You have people come in all the time and say, my father was here, my grandmother was here. And so we have protected this medical resource for the people. There is a center of health reform. If you're the federal government operating a public health resort, you got to make sure it's the latest medical science, yada, yada, yada. And it is self-sufficient. It pays for itself. And so when we read the Organic Act, yes, we have the ideals, but Hot Springs is not a throwaway. It is proof in the pudding. We even had a champion. His name was Stephen Mather. He's the father of the national parks. He's this incredible businessman. He's also probably had melancholia, probably sort of today's bipolar. And he was the one who wrote these things about patriotism, furthering of knowledge, diverting tourist travel. And you can imagine as he's sitting there that he's imagining Hot Springs, because he too would come to Hot Springs during meetings or during his health scares. He would disappear into the Fordyce. They didn't know where he was. And he was seeking his own form of health. All right, so when he's talking about health for the people, when he's talking about travel, he sees it in action, and he's going to talk about Hot Springs, the Great National Spa. So he's using that Great American Spa frame. It is a pleasure park and a health resort, right? There's a question about whether that was the case. He talks about it is the duty of the government to furnish to the poor and fortunates who seek the health-giving waters of the reservation as their last resort. He knew what that meant. He had sought Hot Springs as his last resort. It was not just an idea for him, and he would consider Hot Springs Reservation a park. Speaking of it as such, he's going to be the main pusher for Hot Springs as it renamed not the national park in 1921. And so Hot Springs for him is a place where it makes sense. So if we tell the story of the national parks through Hot Springs, it's not just beauty, it's access. The science is not just for the trees, it's a science of medical hope. The park is demanded by the people. Millions of people come to the park. Black, white, female, male, poor, rich, trying to take a breath or taking your last breath. It is probably one of the most democratic spaces in the United States. And it is meeting the people. And so for us as Arkansans, it's fun to say that Hot Springs, it's a fun fact to say that Hot Springs is probably the oldest park. But it is also probably a point of pride that hot springs is the proof that parks could actually exist. So woo pig sooie, and thank you very much.
All right, we're gonna open it up to questions, if anyone has one, and I'd like to kick it off by asking if you could briefly mention the National Public Health Service venereal disease clinic that was there, because that kind of illustrates a lot of what you're talking about.
Yes, in 1898, there was a federal free health clinic that operated from the government free bathhouse. If you ever look up the history of free federal clinics, it always talks about the 1950s and 60s in San Francisco. That began 50 years prior to that. Officers from the government, from the Army Navy Hospital would go to the free clinic at Hot Springs and the government free bathhouse. And Stephen Mather pushed alongside the newly formed Public Health Service in 1921 to open what's now the Libby Memorial Center. And it was essentially one of the beginnings of large-scale public health. 1917, and well, during World War I, it was discovered that a lot of people in the United States had syphilis. We hadn't really done large-scale community health profiles before. All of a sudden, you have a venereal scare. Where is the best place in the United States to create a model for public health intervention and sort of study? Hot Springs. And so the park is operating alongside the Public Health Service to provide the model public health venereal clinic that's going to be used by dozens of different state clinics around the country. Has a darker history to it because medicine is never just about science, it's also about culture. But that history of public health is sort of central to the Hot Springs infrastructure.
Any questions? Raise a hand.
It's not a question, it's mostly just a comment. Prior to 1832, it was a health center also for Native Americans, was it not?
Yes.
Okay.
So we have the traditionally affiliated tribes in Hot Springs, the Caddo, the Quapaw, the Osage, the Absentee Pawnee. We continue to work with them to understand more of that story. Health and Native communities is extremely important. It's connected to all sorts of practices, cultural understandings, religious frameworks. And so I usually tepidly step around that work in Hot Springs, but we know from oral histories from the Quapaw about people going from what's now Eastern Arkansas to the valley every winter and using it as a wintering place. We know that the Caddo probably are who, I would assume the Caddo are who are introducing early French trappers to Hot Springs. And again, these are at least 4 traditionally associated tribes, but we'll also see people from the Trail of Tears come back to Hot Springs after they've been transferred to present-day Oklahoma, looking for relief at the end of their life as well. So you can't tell you have the deeper medical story, not just the National Park Service story, but the deeper medical stories that people have gone to Hot Springs for hope for millennia.
Okay. I believe we have a comment online.
Yeah, there was one question from Zoom, which was, why were the 2 parks that you mentioned decommissioned as national parks?
There's actually several parks decommissioned. One of them, they had a bunch of fossils and they were stolen after it became popular, so there's no more resource to be had. The Platte National Park, so you can't just protect the place, you have to preserve it, you have to be there, you have to manage it. You need to see people in a hat to make sure that we save it for our children and our children's children. Platte National Park was renamed Chickasaw National Recreation Area in the 60s. There's a movement to have parks expand, right? So parks are cultural value statements. We expand them, we add to them as values change around the country. So parks are a history of and a library of what previous Americans have said was sacred and should be passed on to the next generation. By the 1960s, there's a movement for recreation areas. You're going to dam up a river and you're going to put boats on it. That takes place around the country. And so Platte National Park gets wrapped into the Chickasaw National Recreation Area, which has more of that boating and recreation component. Platte National Park as a historic district still exists at Platte National Park. Mackinac Island, I'm not quite sure why it got decommissioned, but it's still there as a state park. But it doesn't function with that same level of protective status, right?
Is Hot Springs still the most visited national park?
Hot Springs, most visited national park. By 1947, the number of baths plummets and craters. Let me see if I have it anywhere in here. I do not. These are all my extra notes, so. By 1947, penicillin comes along, people stop going to spa parks, and so basically the nation had moved on, right? So cultural value statements, how we use resources, it was no longer as necessary. Once you get something like penicillin or polio vaccines or ibuprofen, why go to hot springs for 3 weeks when you can get better in 3 hours? And yet, the last 3 years, we've been around 2.5 million annual visitors. We are one of the most visited national parks in the country.
Which is the most?
It depends on how you count it, but it's usually like Smokies and or Golden Gate in California. It's like ease of access. But 2.5 million visitors, just a plug that tourism is the second biggest industry in the state of Arkansas. Hot Springs is probably or arguably the single most visited site in the state for the second biggest industry.
Well, and some of the baths are operating, are they not?
Yeah, so we used to have as many as 23, so we had 8 historic bathhouses plus the hotels. So we went from 23 to 2 until about 10 years ago. And then we've now re-added the Quapaw bathhouses recently reopened. So we have the Buckstaff and the Quapaw and the Arlington Hotel. And then in some days they have to push visitors away. There's a renewed interest, right? So the water is the same, but the people have changed. The people need that water again, but in new ways, right? So the resource gets redefined, re-understood by each succeeding generation, and new generations are looking at hot springs in new ways, which is really cool to see that longevity. Unimpaired for future generations, we are the future generation at hot springs for which it was supposed to be left unimpaired.
So the disparaging quotes about hot springs, they seem to spring up, they seem to be dated around the progressive era, when hot springs is well known as a health resort. When does hot springs really unilaterally become equitable for its beauty and other national parks?
That's a good question. It always stayed a little bit different. Up until the 1920s, there was just 900 acres in the park between like 1877 and 1920 something. 900 acres is very small, and so it's really just the bathhouses where the water comes out. And then as there's renewed interest in like wild spaces, hot springs will respond to that national interest. We're going to expand into the mountains, right? So hot springs is changing because as the culture changes, that's when we add Gulf Gorge Campground, as in 1924. We expand the boundaries, and so it does start to emphasize as much of that outdoor recreational beauty. We get donkey rides and such, which is super cool. And we get an old growth forest. We get wildlife preservation. So it's in the 1920s that Hot Springs tries to add its wilderness aspect, and we get renamed as Hot Springs National Park in 1921. But it's not a coincidence that people don't think about Hot Springs as the oldest park, because the third writer on there is one of the early NPS historians, and he's basically writing Hot Springs out, because by the 1920s, Hot Springs stays the most visited park in the country through the 1920s. But then by the 1920s, Park Service is well established enough that you don't really need hot springs as a operational model. And so it sort of falls by the wayside. So the other big national parks have now received that operational capacity, and with the largesse of the grand scenery.
Any other questions? Oops, all the way over there.
I've often wondered on your attendance numbers, how in the world do you count those, since there's, no control going in and out, who's wandering from town.
Well, yeah, we gotta make sure that we get all the wanderers, if you're on Bathhouse Row, you've been counted. Bathhouse Row is that cool place with the formerly Italian poplars that are magically turned into magnolias. And so we have counters on there, we have counters on some of our trail access points and road counters, and then visitor centers, and those are all put into really cool formulas. I just provide the visitor center numbers. Our visitor center last year was the busiest that it's ever been. So we were up about 20% year over year in our visitor center itself.
All right, any others?
Me again.
Oh, okay.
Okay. As I told you earlier, we were full-time RVers for many years, almost 10 years. And we stayed at Gulf of Gorge a lot, and they always had park rangers there. We found out sort of the hard way, you're not supposed to remove anything from a park, including little rocks that wash down the creek there and everything. People were carrying those things out, and the park ranger said, whoa, you're not allowed to take those out of the park. We did not know that, and I guess that's true of any park. You're not supposed to remove nature from that park, is that correct?
That is, there are lots of rocks, and we wanna leave those rocks there again for present and future generations. As Teddy said, we can't mar it. You're not the only person. There's somebody I know who's in my family who I had to remind the same thing. It was very fun. We get to talk about leave no trace principles, because when you leave a rock, you're actually making a promise to people that you will never meet. That you found a place that inspired you so much that you wanted to hold a part of it, but that you are saying, maybe there's somebody just as important as me who I want to also be inspired in 100 years. Obviously, we're talking about a little rock, but when we talk about a tree, or especially archaeological sites, where it's a promise made to people we'll never meet.
So has the statute of limitations expired in her case?
Oh, actually.
Oh, you took it. Okay. Is there anything else? Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you, Dr. West. And if you want to support programs like this, please donate to the Butler Center programming at robertslibrary.org. Join us here at UA Little Rock downtown next month, where we will be featuring Phoenix Smiley and Dr. K. Adele Okoli from the University of Central Arkansas. They present For Constance and Ada, Snail Methods of Queer Archival Practices. So I don't know what snail. Yeah, no, this is what was written down for me. For Constance and Ada, Snail Methods of Queer Archival Practices. Snail. I don't know what it is either. I'll be here to find out. So, thank you very much, and